Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive with us. This time we're going to be looking at user testing.
Yeah.
We're going deep on this one.
User testing, yeah.
And we're using user testing unlocked, gathering meaningful feedback to guide us.
Excellent source.
Really good stuff in there, you know? User testing, I think a lot of people think it's about just like making things look pretty, but it's really not.
Oh, it's so much more than that.
It's really about understanding how people actually like interact and use the things we make.
It's about moving beyond assumptions
Yeah.
and actually, putting real people at the center of the design process, right?
So like instead of just assuming we know what people want, we actually like find out.
Exactly. We involve them, we test, we observe, we ask questions.
Interesting. So is this really like a make or break kind of thing for products?
It can be, yeah.
Really?
Think about it. If a website is difficult to navigate or an app is confusing, people are just going to abandon it.
Yeah, they'll just go somewhere else.
They'll go somewhere else, exactly. User testing helps us find and address these issues early on.
So it's not just about aesthetics, it's like functionality and usability too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it also has benefits beyond just happy users.
Yeah.
It can actually lead to reduced development costs.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and even increased revenue for businesses.
Okay.
So by catching problems early on, you avoid costly redesigns and make sure the product is truly optimized.
So you're saving money in the long run.
Exactly.
Wow.
Oh.
Okay, so can you give us an example of how a company might actually use this in the real world?
Sure.
I'm thinking of a Spotify.
Spotify is a fantastic example, yeah.
They're constantly updating.
They've really embraced a user-centric approach.
Okay.
They use A/B testing a lot.
What's A/B testing?
A/B testing is essentially comparing different versions of a design element.
Okay.
So let's say a playlist recommendation algorithm.
Okay.
And seeing which one performs better with users.
So which one people actually click on more or...
Exactly. Which one leads to more engagement, more, positive feedback.
Oh, so they're constantly testing and experimenting and using the data.
They are. It's a very data-driven approach.
Okay, cool. And is it more than just A/B testing?
Yeah, they also gather user feedback through surveys,
Okay.
in-app messages, even social media monitoring
Wow.
to see how people are responding to new features and updates.
So it's kind of like a constant feedback loop?
It is. They're constantly learning and adapting.
Gotcha. But I'm sure there are some challenges involved in all of this.
Well, of course there are.
Like what?
I think one of the biggest hurdles is recruiting the right participants.
Oh, that makes sense.
You need to find people who accurately reflect your target audience.
So it's not just asking your friends what they think.
Right. If you're testing a mobile game for teenagers, you're not going to get accurate insights from middle-aged adults.
Gotcha. So how do you actually find the right people?
Well, there are different approaches.
Okay.
Some companies use specialized recruiting platforms where you can filter by demographics and other criteria.
Wow.
Some leverage their existing user base, offer incentives,
Okay.
and some even partner with market research firms who specialize in this kind of recruiting.
So there's a whole science to this.
There's a real art to recruiting representative users.
That's interesting. So, okay, you've got your people now. What? How do you actually do the testing part?
Right, so that's where the toolkit comes in.
Okay.
We have all sorts of different methods we can use.
What kind of method?
We have things like usability testing, where we observe users interacting with a product in real time.
Oh, okay.
And we note down any points of friction or confusion.
Interesting.
We have heuristic evaluation, where experts analyze a design against established usability principles.
Okay.
And of course, we can do interviews and surveys to get direct feedback.
So it's each method gives you a slightly different perspective, a
Exactly.
different piece of the puzzle.
Exactly.
Okay, cool. So you mentioned heuristic evaluation, which sounds like it's based on some established principles.
Right.
What are those rooted in?
So user testing is actually grounded in fields like human-computer interaction,
Okay.
usability engineering, and even cognitive psychology.
Oh, wow.
So we're not just looking at how people click buttons, we're thinking about how their brains work,
Really?
how they process information, what makes them tick.
So it's like psychology almost.
It is. It's very much about understanding the human element.
That's fascinating. So speaking of the human element, what are some of the challenges in actually interpreting the data?
Oh, yeah.
Especially qualitative data, like interview transcripts or observation notes.
Right.
It seems like it would be hard to sift through all of that and find something useful.
Yeah, it can be a bit overwhelming.
Yeah.
But it's a crucial step.
Yeah.
It's where we really start to make sense of what we've observed.
So where do you even begin?
Well, first, you want to organize your data right. Transcribe those interviews. Categorize your observations. Put your survey results into a spreadsheet.
So it's all about making order out of the chaos.
Exactly.
Okay, and then what?
Then you start to look for patterns and themes.
Okay.
Are there any common pain points that users keep mentioning?
Okay.
Are certain tasks particularly difficult?
Interesting.
Are there positive trends or features that people rave about?
Oh, that's cool.
You begin grouping similar insights together to see the bigger picture.
So it's like connecting the dots.
Yeah.
And finding those recurring motifs that tell you something about the user experience.
Exactly. And it's important to focus on both the positive and the negative.
Okay.
The things that are working well are just as valuable as the areas for improvement.
So you're looking at the full spectrum of the user experience.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We want to understand what resonates with users, what frustrates them, and what leaves them indifferent.
Wow.
And once you've identified these key themes, you prioritize them.
Based on like how important they are.
Yeah, based on their impact and frequency.
So you're not trying to fix everything at once.
Right.
You're focusing on the issues that will have the biggest impact.
Exactly. It's about being strategic and focusing your efforts where they'll matter most.
I see. So this all sounds incredibly valuable,
It is.
but I imagine it can be hard to actually like implement these findings.
Oh, yeah.
Like, how do you actually make sure that the things you learned actually lead to real changes in the design process?
Communication is key.
Oh, okay.
You need to be able to translate those insights into actionable recommendations.
So like things that designers and developers can actually use.
Exactly.
Okay.
Often this means creating a report or a presentation that summarizes the key findings,
Okay.
highlights the recommendations, maybe uses visuals to make the data more engaging.
It's like you're telling the story of the user in a way that like resonates with the people who are building the product.
Exactly. It's all about storytelling.
Wow. So it's not just about like data and numbers.
No, it's about connecting with people on an emotional level.
I see. And is this like a one-time thing or is it like an ongoing process?
The best companies have integrated user testing into their development cycle.
Okay.
They're constantly seeking feedback and iterating on their designs based on what they learn.
So it's like this continuous feedback loop.
It is, and that's what makes it so powerful.
Gotcha. This has been so eye-opening. I
I
feel
bet.
like we've covered so much,
We have.
but there's still so much more to learn.
Oh, there's always more to learn.
Are there any resources or tools that you would recommend for someone who like wants to dive deeper into this?
Oh, absolutely. There are some fantastic books and websites out there.
Like what?
Don't Make Me Think
Mm-hmm.
by Steve Krug is a classic.
Okay. I heard of that one.
It's a great starting point.
Uh.
The Nielsen Norman Group also has a ton of resources on their website.
Cool. And are there any like online communities or forums where people can connect with other user researchers?
Yeah, there are some really vibrant online communities
Oh, cool.
on platforms like LinkedIn and Slack where people share resources, discuss trends and challenges. It's a great way to stay up to date.
It sounds like there's this whole world of user testing out there.
There is.
It's really cool. I'm feeling inspired to like apply some of this to my own projects.
That's great.
Yeah. So as technology keeps changing,
Right.
the role of user testing is probably going to become even more important, right?
Absolutely. We're seeing new technologies emerge all the time,
Yeah.
like AI and virtual reality.
Right.
And it's crucial that we apply user-centered design principles to these new frontiers.
That makes a lot of sense.
We need to ensure that these technologies are ethical, accessible, and truly beneficial.
That brings up a good point about like ethics.
Right.
As we gather more data about users,
Mhm.
we have to be mindful of their privacy.
Absolutely.
Right.
Transparency and consent are paramount.
Right.
Users should always be informed about how their data is being collected, used, and protected.
So it's about building trust.
Exactly.
This has been a really fascinating discussion.
Yeah, it has.
We've talked about the practical aspects of user testing,
Yeah.
the theoretical foundations,
Yeah.
even the ethical implications.
It's a multifaceted field.
Yeah, it really is. I feel like we've just scratched the surface.
We have, but it's been a great start.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
what final piece of advice would you give to our listeners who are interested in user testing?
I would say be curious,
Okay.
be open-minded, and don't be afraid to experiment. User testing is all about learning and adapting.
That's great advice.
Embrace the journey.
Okay, on that note, I think we'll bring this deep dive to a close.
Sounds good.
Thank you so much for joining us on this exploration of user testing.
You're welcome.
We hope you've learned some valuable insights and are feeling inspired to apply these principles to your own work and life.
Absolutely.
So it can feel overwhelming, like trying to make sense of all the data from user testing.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's a lot of information to process.
Where do you even begin? Like, you've got stacks of notes and observations and all this stuff.
Right. Well, the first thing is you want to make sure it's all organized.
Okay, so like transcribing interviews and stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm.
Transcribing interviews, categorizing your observations, putting all your survey results into a spreadsheet.
So kind of like creating order out of the chaos.
Yeah, exactly. Once you've got everything in a structured format, it makes the analysis process much smoother.
Okay, so what happens after you organize everything?
Then you can start to look for patterns and themes in the data.
Okay.
Are there any common pain points that users consistently mention?
Okay.
Are certain tasks particularly difficult?
Gotcha.
Or are there positive trends or features that people just rave about?
So it's about finding those connections and seeing like the bigger picture.
Exactly. You're looking for those recurring motifs that reveal something important about the user experience.
Okay. And I guess it's important to focus on both the good and the bad, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The things that are working well are just as valuable as the areas for improvement.
So we're not just looking for problems, we're trying to understand the whole experience.
Yes, exactly. We want to understand what resonates with users, what frustrates them, and even what leaves them feeling indifferent.
That makes sense. So once you've identified these like key themes, what do you do with them?
Well, you prioritize them based on their impact and frequency.
So you're not trying to fix everything at once.
Right. You focus on the issues that have the biggest impact on the user experience.
So it's about being strategic and like choosing your battles.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've analyzed the data, identified the key insights, prioritized the areas for improvement. What happens next?
Well, now you have to communicate those findings to the people who can actually make the changes.
Okay, so the designers, the developers, the product managers.
Okay.
But how do you do that effectively? Like, how do you ensure that those insights actually lead to real changes?
I think communication is key here.
Okay.
You need to translate those insights into actionable recommendations that designers and developers can actually use.
So it's about making it clear how to actually improve the product.
Right. Often this means creating a report or a presentation that summarizes the key findings, highlights the recommendations, and maybe uses visuals to make the data more engaging and understandable.
So it's like you're telling a story with the data.
Exactly. You're painting a picture of the user experience, highlighting the highs and lows, the frustrations and the delights.
That's a great way to put it. So it's not just about presenting data, it's about making it relatable and engaging.
Right. And when you can connect with people on an emotional level, they're more likely to be receptive to your recommendations.
That makes sense. So is this like a one-time thing, or is this something that companies should be doing on an ongoing basis?
Ideally, it's an ongoing process.
Okay.
The best companies have integrated user testing into their entire development cycle.
So they're constantly getting feedback and making improvements.
Exactly. It's like a continuous feedback loop that helps them create products that truly meet the needs of their users.
This is also fascinating. It's amazing to see how much thought and effort goes into creating a great user experience.
It is. And it's really rewarding to see how user testing can make a real difference in people's lives.
Okay, so we've talked about analyzing the data and communicating the findings, but what about the ethical considerations?
Right. Ethics are incredibly important in user testing.
Like, what kinds of things do we need to be thinking about?
Well, first and foremost, we need to make sure we're protecting users' privacy.
Of course.
Users should always be informed about how their data is being collected, used, and protected.
So it's about transparency and consent.
Exactly.
Okay, what else?
We also need to be mindful of potential biases in our research.
Like what kind of biases?
Well, for example, if we only recruit participants from a certain demographic or background, our findings might not be representative of the wider user population.
That makes sense.
So we need to make sure our research methods are inclusive and equitable.
So it's not just about getting data, it's about getting the right data.
Exactly.
This has been such a thought-provoking discussion. It's clear that user testing is about so much more than just making things look pretty.
It really is. It's about understanding people solving problems and creating technology that truly serves humanity.
That's a great way to put it.
Hmm.
So on that note, I think we'll wrap up this part of our deep dive on user testing.
Sounds good.
We've covered a lot of ground today, from understanding the different methods to analyzing the data and communicating the findings. And we even touched on the ethical considerations, which are so important.
Absolutely.
But I think it's safe to say that user testing is a crucial part of creating products and services that people love to use.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've talked about the importance of user testing. We've explored different methods. We even touched on the ethical considerations.
Yeah, that's a lot to consider.
But I'm still kind of curious about that analysis phase. Like, how do you take all the raw data from interviews, observation surveys, and turn it into something useful?
It's a crucial step for
Yeah.
sure. And it can feel a bit like detective work, honestly.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you're sifting through all this evidence, looking for clues, piecing together a story.
So how do we become good data detectives?
Well, the first thing is organization, right? You got to get all that data organized.
Okay, so like transcribing the interviews and stuff.
Exactly. Transcribing interviews, categorizing your observations, putting all your survey data into a spreadsheet.
Okay, so just making sure everything is in a clear and structured format.
Right. Once you've got that structure, it makes the analysis process a lot smoother.
Okay, so what happens after you've organized everything? What's the next step in our detective work?
Then it's time to start looking for patterns and themes in the data.
Okay, so what are we looking for specifically?
Well, are there any common pain points that users keep bringing up?
Okay.
Are there certain tasks they find particularly difficult?
Yeah, I can see that.
Or are there any features that people just rave about? The things that really delight them.
So we're looking for those recurring things, the things that tell us something important about the user experience.
Yeah, exactly. And it's important to focus on both the positive and the negative.
Oh, right. So not just the problems.
Yeah. Right. The things that are working well are just as valuable as the areas for improvement.
So it's about understanding the whole picture.
Yeah. We want to understand what resonates with users, what frustrates them, what leaves them indifferent.
And once you've identified those key themes and patterns, what do you do next?
Oh, you got to prioritize them
Okay. Based on what?
based on their impact and their frequency.
Right. So we're not trying to fix everything at once.
Exactly. You focus on the issues that will have the biggest impact on the overall user experience.
Okay. So it's about being strategic and making sure your efforts are focused where they'll make the most difference.
Right. It's all about maximizing your impact.
This all makes a lot of sense, but I'm wondering about the next step. Like, we've analyzed the data, we've identified the key insights, we've prioritized the areas for improvement. But how do we actually make sure that this leads to real changes? How do we make sure the product actually gets better?
That's where communication comes in.
Okay, so we need to communicate our findings to the people who can actually make those changes.
It's exactly. You got to talk to the designers, the developers, the product managers, whoever is responsible for making decisions about the product.
And how do we do that effectively?
Well, you need to translate those insights into actionable recommendations.
Yeah.
Things that people can actually use to improve the product.
Okay, so it's not just about presenting data, it's about giving people complete steps they can take.
Right. You want to make it as clear and easy as possible for people to understand what needs to be done.
So would you say it's important to tell a story with the data?
Yeah. Storytelling can be really powerful.
Okay.
You want to paint a picture of the user experience, highlight the highs and lows, the frustrations and the delights.
So it's about connecting with people on an emotional level.
Exactly. When people can connect with the users on an emotional level, they're more likely to be invested in making the product better.
This has been so insightful. I'm really starting to see how user testing can be used to create amazing products and experiences.
It's a powerful tool for sure.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, is there any final advice you would give to our listeners who are interested in learning more about user testing or maybe even applying it to their own work?
I would say just be curious.
Yeah.
Be open to learning new things. Don't be afraid to experiment.
Yeah,
The world of user testing is constantly evolving, so it's important to stay curious and keep learning.
I think that's great advice. And on that note, I think we'll bring this deep dive to a close. Thank you so much for joining us today and exploring the fascinating world of user testing with us.
It's been my pleasure.
We hope you found it valuable and that you're feeling inspired to create more user-centered products and experiences.
Absolutely. Keep those users in mind.